Hey Marcy, how you doing today? Nice to see you.
I'm great. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. How's your day been today?
Not bad, hanging in.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so let the viewers know who you are, what you do, and why you do it, Marcy.
Sure. I'm Dr. Marcy Brink. I'm trained both as an anthropologist and a sex and intimacy counselor. I have kind of three main things that I do, both in the clinic and workshops in my writing and research. And that's to help people figure out what it is they want and what they need, which sounds really simple, but it's not. And then learn to talk about it or communicate it. Could also be non-verbally through pictures or drawings, sort of express themselves about what it is that turns them on or makes them tick.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Like I want to start by talking about previous relationships that we've had. We've all had different struggles when it comes to previous relationships that we've navigated through. What would you say some of your struggles have been in previous relationships, and how have you navigated through that to be where you are now?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's a kind of intense question, and you prepared me. Hard sometimes to talk about these things, and it actually is always a great reminder because when clients come into the clinic, I kind of just expect them to spill their hearts about what's going on, what works for them, and what doesn't with their relationships, especially intimate ones. And it's always a good reflection. So I thank you for asking me because it's not easy to share these things sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that, growing up, I had a very healthy relationship with the idea of kind of connecting with other people. I always had a crush on people. This was encouraged. I was allowed to kind of go on dates. This wasn't a problem. And so I got to have a lot of different experiences and see kind of what kind of company I wanted. I kind of think about relating that way. So who do I want to spend my time with? Who do I want to hang out with? Who do I want to kind of dive deep with? And so there were a number of years, and it wasn't always so easy. It wasn't like a challenge to get dates or to meet people because I'm pretty outgoing and I enjoy dating. But I think that the number one thing that's changed for me since I began kind of more conscious relating or conscious sexuality and intimacy, is I think I was kind of on like a track. Like I thought there was a right way to meet people and a right way to be in a relationship. And I think the main thing that changed is about 5 years ago, I started getting into this world of conscious sexuality or conscious relating. And I just, started to learn a little bit more about what it actually was that I wanted. I know it sounds so simple, but I
Mm.
was kind of doing the right thing. Like I was a good girl. I was like dating nice people. They were lovely. I was thinking about kind of traditional relationships. And it all worked out great on paper, except it wasn't really me. It wasn't really authentic to me.
Right.
And that's been a major change in the past 3 years and with the work I do now.
Excellent, excellent. You mentioned conscious sexuality, and when we look at like people's relationship orientations and styles, they differ all the time. Like in the context of human nature, we go out all the time and we're attracted to different people. We find different people attractive all the time, So what is your view on monogamy versus non-monogamy in the
Yeah.
context of human nature?
You're hitting all the hard questions right away.
Yeah.
So I do think, and that's maybe one of the things I was kind of hinting at that I didn't say straight out, is that we kind of talked about this. I do consider myself a polyamorous person. I actually kind of always thought that that made sense to me. I loved a lot of people. And again, I don't know who your viewers and listeners are and how much this is familiar to them. Polyamory is loving more than one
Yeah, they're
person.
very open groups, so go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So again, it's a big umbrella of open relating, but it took me, 40 years to kind of understand that that was even an option. And so, I'd be in a relationship and I'd meet someone else and I would have to kind of pivot to another relationship. And I was always kind of like, but I love this person and I love that person. And what's been interesting for me, kind of learning more about relationship style options, is that I didn't know there were other options. Like I thought if you told me what a relationship was, and I also thought I had a really open mind about it, there was really only one model. It was sort of like we date, we get together, we kiss each other, we fall in love, we move in, we get married, there's kids. I don't know if you've heard this expression, the relationship escalator. Is
Right,
that a familiar?
the trajectory of like what is
Yeah,
normal,
yeah.
seen as normal, like traditionally and things. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I love this image. If it's not familiar for your listeners, this is idea that you get on an escalator, so the stairs are moving up, and once you're on, that's kind of the the trajectory. There's, you could get off, but then this is like there's only one real path. It's this curve. And then also, if you get to the top and you have kids and you're married and divorced, you kind of start back from the beginning. And the relationship escalator just goes up exactly the same way.
Mm.
And something that I thought about a lot over my life and that I try to talk about with my clients and people that I discuss kind of other styles with is that you don't have to be on that escalator. You're allowed to go out with somebody and like try to have this kind of connection with them. It doesn't mean necessarily because you like each other and you kiss each other and maybe you're intimate with each other that you necessarily the next step is move in, get married, etc. But everyone, I think that the message I was given is that this is all one package. So, and that's the model I think of monogamy and for modern relating in general, also traditional relating. The home is supposed to be your everything, and you spend all your time there. This is where you have all your hobbies and the kids and everything. And there's this package of expectations when you're dating that you expect, this person to be your everything. And what I've liked about thinking about relationship design, I call it creative relationship design. Never mind like polyamory, monogamy, whatever it is. What I really want for myself and for people that I am in communication with, that I'm supporting, I want them to be having the kind of relationships that they want to be having, not the kind of relationships that someone told them they were supposed to be having.
Right.
And so once we kind of think outside the box a little bit about what's possible, I find that for myself and other people, you're allowed to have the kind of connections with people that you want and to kind of craft it for yourself rather than just one size fits all.
Excellent. So for people who are curious about how they can design their relationship, maybe they're currently monogamous or they're, within a kind of design that they didn't design themselves, but their partner is like maybe used to monogamy or something, and they'd like to like open up the relationship, like be able to design the relationship, and they'd like to communicate this with their partner. How can they go about speaking to their partner about this in a way that their partner can understand?
Okay. So I want to separate two different things because I know that you have a lot of people who listen that are, you said like they're anxious about entering into relationships and anxiety is keeping them
Right.
from entering into relationships. So what I say, one of the things that makes me anxious is to go on a date and know that like to be testing that person for the whole package, like is he a good father? Is he a good worker? Is he a good friend? Is it exciting? Do we have sexual chemistry? Do I like the way he looks? There's this such everything we expect in a date. And the way I try to kind of think about it is design is first of all, I have to figure out kind of what I want. Like, how do I, like I said, like, what kind of company do I want? How do I want to spend my time? How do I want to feel around people? And then I let that whole other list of stuff kind of go out the window for a little bit, at least for the beginning of a dating period.
Mhm.
And so that way it's sort of like Legos. Like, there's a whole bunch of Legos that you can build blocks and like make your designs. You can buy the pre-made design, which we kind of know really well. So before you get to the question about, which I think is a great question that couples sometimes have, is we're having a monogamous relationship. That's our understanding. We want to change that structure. For people who are even dating, they can ask themselves, what parts of the Lego do I want to take to build my own kind of relationship? Can I give an example of kind of an older divorced woman I was working with?
Go ahead.
So she had been married for about 30 years. It was not an easy divorce, and she was nervous about going out dating. She really wanted to kind of think about again what relationships meant for her. And so she would go on a date and she would say, I don't want to have to, do all his laundry and clean all his clothes. Like, I don't need to marry an old man to like take care of what his ex-wife did. And I said, you're allowed to have the kind of relationship you want, including, for example, not moving in with each other. Like, again, before we get to, kind of create really creative forms of non-monogamy, whatever, even in a monogamous relationship, I try to empower people in a way that I think I didn't get that message as a kid, that it's not all or nothing. If this client of mine, for example, is 70, she has her own home, she has her own life, she's very used to being on her own, she's actually enjoying her freedom, but she falls in love with the next door neighbor. The relationship escalator says that if they love each other a lot, they have to move in together. So she'll break up with him before she gets to the move-in state because she doesn't really want to live with him, but she loves him.
Right.
And they could be great neighbors. That's just one creative kind of option. I don't know how that sounds to you.
No,
Like
yeah,
it's
no, I get what you're trying to say. So, like, basically, it doesn't have to be the structure of like, okay, we at this stage now, so we must do this. It's like, okay, how do you actually feel about your
yeah,
current situation, and what is the best way to move forward for you? Is that what you're trying to say?
Absolutely. And it does come from, and this is kind of the part that's, you need to do a little, everyone needs to do a little bit of work to figure out what it is they need. So, if you're, let's take this, 70-year-old lady, for example, again, what she needs right now in life is companionship. But, he wants to, let's say, move in, and they can think creatively. What are the needs actually? The need is to spend time together, is the need to feel security, is the financial need. So this is always kind of step one that I recommend to people is like, figure out, that's why I said, figure out what you need and figure out what you want. Because it's not always obvious to us. And we kind of think it's the same about getting into a relationship. Like we think we want to be in a relationship because we want a lot of physical touch and cuddles all the time, which is great, right? Everybody needs to like feel nice and have, physical contact. But then they're willing to compromise on the kind of relationships they have just to get that touch because it's a package. Again, we're back to the package deal. Whereas, maybe they just need a good massage and then like they could feel more free to go date people and not kind of use their bodies in ways that maybe aren't authentic to them. Like we try to differentiate between needs and strategies in this kind of unbraiding the package thing, unbraiding the braid.
So talking more about the needs that people have, needs change over time. So as they're designing their relationship in real time and designing their path, like as their needs are changing, how do they communicate those changes to their partner? Because their partners have their needs as well that change. So how do they communicate that in a way that they can have that conversation that brings them both into the change going forward?
That's great. And that actually brings us back. You asked this question about if somebody wants to open a relationship. Again, that's a whole kind of Pandora's box. I'm happy to talk about it. But I love the question because in long-term relationships, our needs are going to change, right? So they may stay the same, but it's very rare that they do. And a lot of couples in long-term relationships find themselves, again, after 5, 10, 15 years, or even in dating, the kind of dating people were doing at 21 isn't the same as they were doing at 25 or 30, but they're just kind of stuck in doing the same pattern. The ideal thing is, first of all, again, you have to figure out what it is you need and want. And then it does take some bravery and courage if those things are different. Because people kind of get stuck in this, you get together with somebody and you liked that person that they were. And it's really hard to watch people that we love change because what we loved about them in the beginning, maybe they want something totally different now. Like I see it often also like if somebody in a couple wants to change jobs, they're like, but wait a minute, when I met you, you were a professor, not a sex therapist. You're a totally different person now, for example. So it's really hard to let our partners change. It's also hard to let ourselves change because we're pretty married to that person that we were. First of all, I recommend people kind of writing this out for themselves, like having a chance to talk it out, like, either in therapy or just like do free writing or kind of, connect with themselves and understand what it is they need. And then I think another cool tip about expressing what you need is to say that's not your partner's job to fulfill that need. Let's say you have a new need. You used to be really into something and kind of like, you used to be into cinema and now you like rock climbing. Okay, it's just to take something kind of neutral.
Yeah.
And maybe you met your partner and you both loved cinema and it was a thing you did together. You can still go to the cinema, but you're allowed to also embark on your new rock climbing career. Your partner doesn't have to go with you on that path.
Right, right.
You can support each other, and it's not always our partner's needs. I mean, it's our partner's job to satisfy all of our needs. It can be met sometimes in other ways that are not necessarily intimate at all. It's, maybe I need adventure. So like
Right.
I need to go rock climbing or something.
Right. So essentially, having your own life and your partner being able to support you in having your own life, like encourage you to have your own life, and they having their own life as well, and meeting each other in the things that you have in common and share together. Would that be a good analogy of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, like I think about it when you look at, the dating apps, like sometimes the list on the dating apps is like, I'd like a girl who can do, she likes the outdoors and she likes the beach and she likes dogs. Again, these things are all nice and fine, but if you meet a girl who doesn't like the beach, you're allowed to go to the beach and still love that girl, for example. You know what I mean? And I think there's this sense because we imagine our primary main partner to kind of be our everything. Again, this is a kind of romantic idea from the movies. Now, sometimes it does work. You meet someone who's like your everything all the time, but that gets old really fast because then you kind of lose yourself in this mix up of your personalities. I
Mm.
think that that's maybe like an interesting way to think about it is just, you're again, not only are you allowed to have your own life, it creates like some good loving tension when you're each your own person. You don't
Mm.
have to like mix everything up all the time.
Right, right. And speaking about people that are in a monogamous relationship now, like they've been monogamous with their partner for some time, but along the way, someone has stepped out of the relationship and infidelity has happened, but they haven't communicated what has happened to their partner and they've continued in this relationship in this way. So now they're carrying around a sense of guilt about what they've done. They would like to come clean to their partner just to maybe get it off their chest or just to be transparent and honest with their partner, but they're worried about how this is going to come across and how it's going to affect the relationship going forward. In what way can this situation be communicated? And is there a way to rectify the situation, or is it just going to be like, okay, this could be a disaster. It is what it is. We have to see what happens.
So I think one of the leading couples and sex therapists in the world, this woman named Esther Perel, has done a lot of writing and research about infidelity. Now, cheating happens because someone's need isn't getting met, and either the other person can't satisfy the need, or the person who cheats doesn't know how to tell that person that they have this need. And that's usually what it is. That's, they're in a pattern, they have a working thing going. Sometimes they're afraid if they express a new need that their partner will reject them. Everyone's always really afraid of rejection and kind of being embarrassed. They might feel that they can be judged if they express this need, so they find a strategy outside of the monogamous relationship to satisfy that need. Now, the question I ask people is, what was so scary about sharing that need with your partner? And it does, like you said, like I think courage is the word of the day for some reason. It takes a lot of courage to admit to a partner, first of all, that they are, before you even get to cheating, that there's a need that's not being met in the relationship, and being open enough and kind of trusting enough, and also being willing to hear a no. Like, let's say you have a need, you want, again, rock climbing, and your partner's like, I'm not into rock climbing, I'm not going to do it with you. You have to be also open to being rejected at some level, but that's kind of what keeps real intimacy going, is this kind of, feeling that I'm allowed to express a need, and it's okay if it can't be met. At least the need is out there. Um, Again, Esther Perel and a lot of other researchers have written about infidelity, that in some cultures, there's also a cultural thing that infidelity is the end all, like worst case scenario, and like the cultural context. I've seen Hollywood movies, people are killing each other over this. There are other contexts, both historically and other places in the world, where infidelity is seen as, okay, this happens. We know it's statistically very, very widespread. Can we repair, first of all, the relationship and this question of lack of honesty in the relationship? And can those needs be met in the future in a way that would make this arrangement feel better? People do recover from infidelities. And I always kind of want to put that like asterisk on this, that the sense that infidelity is like a death knell to the relationship, it's just not true. People do recover from it, and they can move on.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So looking at like relationships, like especially like monogamous relationships, there's usually like a leader in that relationship, right? Like in most cases. So as a woman, you personally, like, how do you feel about having a man that is able to take the lead in a relationship, make a plan for your life, like a plan that you choose to follow, right? Or like, how do you feel about having an independent viewpoint about how you want to live your life independent of your relationship? Which one resonates with your spirit more as a woman, would you say?
So I don't know if I can answer the question as a woman, but I can answer it definitely as someone who's thought a lot about gender and power dynamics in relationships. And what we see also, like I recently wrote an article called How to Take Control Over Your Sex Life. It was for women, and it was kind of the idea that you're allowed to be empowered to communicate yourself and to take the lead. You're also allowed as a woman and as anybody to have times when you want someone else to take the lead. I think, and I see it also in same sex relationships, that in all relationships, there's power dynamics in the workplace, in the coffee shop, in the street, in intimate relationships also. There's a lot of power dynamics that are either taken for granted, that this is the expectation socially, culturally, that this is the kind of leadership role I'm supposed to take in the home with kids, with family, with work, right? There's a lot of messages we get. And again, there, I think it's important for each person to kind of check in with themselves and be honest about the dynamics that work for them. And what I find actually with a lot of people, I found this really helpful, is that sometimes we say, I am a dominant person. I know what I like, I lead the way, whatever at work or whatever, right? Or they say, I'm more passive. I kind of trust the universe to lead me in this direction and I'm going to go with the flow. And then we make these kind of totalizing statements about we are this, but it turns out that we have a lot of different sides and they can also change over time. So what I tell people to do if they're having like an issue with power dynamics, who's taking the lead, who's more passive, all the roles are great as long as they're kind of acknowledged. Like, and most people never say those words out loud. Like, and you can think of it with a little example, like who orders, dinner, or who pays for dinner, or who initiates a date, or who initiates sexual, contact. There are kind of patterns and roles that we're given in society. Again, they don't always suit us at all the times. The question is what works for me. So I can't answer really as a woman. I can answer is that there are some times when I really like someone to take the lead and take the wheel. And there's other places in my life and other times in my life where I say, I know what I want and this is my time to go get it. And great, like I'll get the support that I need to do that and I'll do what needs to get done. But it's cool if like a couple can have a conversation about it, in a kind of nice way about it. Honey, you always pick up the check. Would you like me to pick up the check this time? I know there's a lot of talk about dating and who gets the checks these days. But you can have that conversation without it like, I don't know, blowing anybody's mind, I think, right? That is just like put it on the table. Like do you want to, choose the movie tonight or do you want me to choose the movie tonight? Like some people, there's all sorts of places where we have to make choices and take the lead. And
So, like outside of like expectations from society, when it comes to these type of like, let's say, gender roles, do you think there's innate nature in men and women that naturally conform to specific gender roles, or what's your viewpoint on that?
I don't actually. I'm not. It's such a popular question these days about kind of gender and sexuality, what's biological and what's cultural, which again, in my anthropologist hat, we've been, kind of trying to figure out for a long time. I think that the best research that I know and the kind of experience that I've had is that across cultures, this also really changes. And so what counts as the right kind of woman or the right kind of man, and then the way those dynamics play out in relationships is different in different places. So, I just remember like an old anthropology famous article that was, about women's leadership, for example, in the tribe. So the women were kind of the speakers, they had the biggest voices, and the kind of aristocratic men in this tribe somewhere, they were very quiet. And the women were kind of the big speakers. And so, when you just look at gender dynamics across the world and across time, they are always changing. And so that kind of cultural specificity leads me to believe that we can't take them apart so much, biological and the cultural. But I think sometimes we ignore the cultural because the biological is kind of the easy, men are like this, women are like this, except that they're not like this all the time and across the world. And so then, okay, so what do you do but all of these exceptions? And I think that that's, if you're asking personally, I think I always felt I was a little bit of an exception when people described the feminine. I was like, this isn't really me. But I've also come to kind of explore those areas more and say, okay, this is where like my comfort zone is. I'm allowed to experience different kind of dynamics. Like, why don't I try out different things and see what kind of dynamics actually work for me? Rather than
Yeah,
again, like one size fits all.
yeah, for sure. There are definitely differences and changes in different areas and with different people. So it does depend on the type of person you are and who you kind of resonate with and fit with to move forward with your like relationship and things like that. Yeah. Now looking at like brand new relationships, like when people like start dating, like and like they tend to get like butterflies and really excited about this new person that they've just met. Sometimes it's to the point that they start to lose their sense of self as they're getting immersed in this new relationship. So how can people get immersed in a new relationship without necessarily losing a sense of self in the process?
Hmm. I'm like kind of smiling at myself because I am a kind of very deeply romantic person, and I have fallen head over heels for someone right away, and then instantly led to, a million texts, photos, songs. Like this happens sometimes. We have a nice name for it called new relationship energy. This the butterflies thing. That's kind of from the scientific part. Like, there's hormones, endorphins, all these things, excitement, dopamine about this new person. And without, taking away from that fun and those butterflies, the best way to kind of figure out if this is a thing that's going to keep making you happy and keep working and not lose yourself is to slow down a little bit. Now, that can be really hard for a lot of people because they're so excited when it's not easy to meet someone that you have butterflies with, right? You don't get that kind of match every day. What happens a lot of the times, and certainly with applications, is that somebody will have a match. They'll get a lot of butterflies based on a little bit of information and a lot of imagination, right? So they'll kind of see this person, they look nice, they wrote the right things, the banter is good, the chat is nice, and they'll kind of get the carried away part is not necessarily actually about that person. It's about this kind of I'm imagining what I want and I'm kind of projecting it onto this person. Now, again, it sounds like I'm not romantic in that sense, and I really am a romantic. So I think the question to that, like the way to kind of figure that is just to slow down a little bit. So, I meet a lot of people who get frustrated on like, because they'll go on a date and they'll be so excited because the chat was really great on the apps. And then they met them, the vibe wasn't the same. The butterflies weren't there. And it turns out the butterflies were a little bit of a product of fantasy and imagination. Now, again, fantasy and imagination is great. It what keeps us going. It's fun, like pleasure is good. And, we like these things. But I think, don't put all the stakes in on date one, right? Or move quickly from an app. This is just the practical thing. Like if you're chatting for like, months on the app and then you finally meet someone, you've spent a lot of time and energy kind of building up expectations that may or may not be met. And I really don't think there's any substitute. If you're looking for a face-to-face connection, like if that's what you want, it's better to just to hop in and try and see, is this person, before I tell you my whole life story and I have, opened my heart to the stranger, meet them, check the real life vibe, and then you can say, how much more do I like? Am I really excited, or I'm just excited about the idea of being in love or the idea about this person rather than the person themselves?
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, like we speak to like people all the time about their relationships, and as we speak to people, we learn different things about them in regards to their relationships. What would you say are some of the biggest things that you've learned after speaking with people in regards to their relationships and like what their kind of the issues that they have and what the solution to those issues are?
Okay, so kind of takeaways from the clinic is what am I learning from the backstage of relationships?
Yeah.
Let's see. I think at the beginning of relationships, there's a lot of projection, a lot of imagining what will be, which makes it actually really hard to be present because, you're what was, what will be. It's really hard to be with that person like in the present. And so, as much as you can, and there's certain like body mind techniques, breathing, focusing, dancing, like different things that bring you actually back to your body, um, that lets you see things more clearly. And I think most of us in kind of modern societies, we're just busy, we're running around all the time. We don't really take a break and check in with ourselves, like, how am I feeling about this? I meet a lot of clients that go on a date, and again, because of the expectations of what's supposed to happen, they just kind of go through the motions, and they find themselves, I don't know, the morning after or after the date, kind of having gone on a date with someone they didn't really want to go on a date with, because they just didn't take a moment to like check in, like take a deep breath. Let's say two people at the bar, someone invites somebody home or whatever, and they're like, okay, that's fine, but they're not really sure they want to go. Like, take a moment. You can say, you know what? Let me think about that for a minute. Do you mind if I just check? The kind of way we think about it with conscious relating is you say, let me check with myself for a minute. And then like go to the bathroom for a minute, go to the loo or whatever, and you just take a minute. Like, do I ask yourself, not when I'm in front of this like opportunity with a person who's lovely and nice, and maybe I don't want to disappoint them, but like, do I really want to go home with them after the pub? Like, and take a minute to be with yourself. And I think that most people just don't do that because that's not part of like our training to like take a moment and take a breath and actually check with yourself. So that's an interesting thing that I've seen. Um, I see that people make a lot of assumptions about their partners. And mostly they're assuming that the partner wants what they want because they love each other and you have a good relationship. They assume that what their partner wants is what they would want. And if they don't want it, it means there's something wrong with the relationship rather than we just are different people. Kind of brings us back to what you asked is to, you know, again, this is another famous Esther Perel quote, you know, desire needs a gap to cross. Like you're your own person, I'm my own person. We might meet in like 80% of things, but it's okay for us to have things that are different. It's kind of maybe what makes it interesting to hang out. Um, I do think I wish that people would talk more about sex. Is it okay that I say it in your show? Like,
Yeah,
you
for
know, I
sure.
know it's about relationships and dating, but people have a lot of hangups about it. It's a taboo topic. It's hard to talk about it. It's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing to say what we want. It's really hard to say what we don't want because we are afraid sometimes of insulting somebody or offending them if we say what we don't want, even if it's not about them, even if we just don't like that thing. And I find that a lot of tension builds up, and not the good kind of tension. A lot of stress builds up around sexuality that's kind of unstated. And then people find themselves, especially in longer term relationships, with kind of they were going again, and emotions things are mostly fine, but it turns out, you know, privately they're not maybe enjoying this activity as much as they could be. Uh, but again, it takes practice, and it's some of those things you can also practice with yourself. Can I take a journal and kind of like, I like this, I would like this to happen. I don't like it when we do this. You know, what are my boundaries? All those really basic things. It's embarrassing. It's hard. You know, even makes me I always say I would blush a little bit, even like, you know, as a sex therapist, but it's worth it. That's, I think, the number one thing. And a lot of people actually go to like couples therapists, couples counseling, and most or a lot of couples counselors actually aren't trained to talk about sex stuff like intimacy and sexuality. So I can say myself, I was in couples therapy for a year and we didn't really talk about sexuality and it was important. We were having troubles in that area and they were reflective of other troubles in the relationship. It was a pattern of issues. And what I love about doing sex therapy is as soon as we start to talk about that stuff, it's so hard to talk about, but everything else becomes really clear. Like and once you learn to talk about it, it's like a muscle that you can strengthen. And I just find the more we talk about the hard things, I guess that's true about also emotional stuff, emotional sexual stuff, the more our partners are close to us. You know, that's where the kind of relational intimacy grows, is through the sharing of, you know, the hard conversations.
I,
Also the fun conversations, you know, it can
yeah,
be
yeah.
fun to talk about it.
Yeah, it is definitely important to be able to communicate about how you feel in order to really know yourself and find out who you are and who you want to be personally to yourself. Yeah, so Marcy, it's been a great speaking with you. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared. Where can people find you, find out more about you, and find out more about what you do?
Sure. So I guess we can post the links on your YouTube right, comments. I have a website called curotica.com. And I also, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, marcy.brink.
Excellent, excellent. And
Be
for the
happy to get
view,
in touch.
excellent.
Mhm.
And for the viewers, all of that information will be in the description so you can get in touch with Marcy. Once again, Marcy, thank you so much for coming on. Any final words before we end the session?
Yeah, I'm so glad, again, that just like I said, that you're having these conversations with people all around the world. It's a great topic to think about. How can we decrease our anxiety about relationships by kind of thinking together about what works and what, you know, tips we have to kind of make this easier and enjoyable even.
Excellent, excellent.
Thanks again for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Marcy.